And a slightly different introduction this week, but there you have it. That's life, and this is Three Women. I'm your host, Sherry DeNovo, MPP Parkdale Hyde Park. And of course, if you're not already aware, you should be aware, it is Black History Month. And we're delighted to have on two women really going to talk about Black Herstory. And the first, Gilary Massa, let me tell you a little bit about her. Also, of course, you're always welcome to call in 416-946-7000 or to tweet in if you're the shy type at Sherry DeNovo, CHERIDINOVO. If you follow us, we'll follow you. Gilary Massa, our first guest. She's a proud Afro Latina Muslim with a long-standing history in community activism. She's committed to creating spaces for communities to fight on their own terms against injustice and oppression. And over the past 10 years, Gilary has been an active member of the labor movement and student movement, where she's fought for the rights of students and workers alike. Gilary is the equity officer for Cupe 1281, and she's also a new mom. Gilary, welcome to Three Women.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your own story. Were you born here?
No, actually, I was born in Panama. My mother immigrated to Canada when I was about 4 years old on an English scholarship. And after that, she decided to keep her roots here and raised my sister and I in Toronto.
And so now you're the equity officer. What is an equity officer for those out in Radio Land who don't know what that means?
Well, I mean, it's a very humble position on my local labor union, and essentially, you know, the job that I do is to try to bring ideas of equity and anti-oppression to my local and to the labor movement in general, and to start having people think about their role within the labor movement as not just representing workers, but also understanding that we come from diverse backgrounds, and that often impacts our ability to do work or the rights that we have in the workplace.
And the discussion about the sort of intersectionality of who we all are is very current these days. And in fact, I just came from an anti-oppression workshop run by somebody you probably might know, Tanya DeMello. And so it's very, very top of mind for me right now. And I'm just, so, here we are, Black History Month again. And we're a long way from when it was first instituted. Yeah. What's good? What's bad? Where are we at, Gilary?
I think that it's important that we have months or days that are designated particularly to pause as a community and as a society to reflect on not only the history and contributions of folks belonging to that equity-seeking group, so in this case for Black folks, but also, to think about the ways in which we can improve. And I mean, in the city of Toronto, we've been having, thanks to organizations like Black Lives Matter, has been having a lot of conversations about Black existence in Toronto, and whether or not access to services, the way that we are policed or surveilled as the Black communities, poverty, and how, all of these things disproportionately impacts Black communities in the city, and the role that the city can play, is a conversation that has been had a lot over this past year in this community. I think Black History Month, its limitations is that I feel as though we need to be talking about Black history of this country well beyond February. When, we often hear complaints about February being the shortest month of the year, and dedicated to talking to about such a major issue. And I think, especially in our school system, talking about, the real history and legacy of slavery in this country, and how it's not something that simply took place in the U.S., but also has a history in this country as well.
Do we do enough in our educational system about it?
I don't think so. And I think that, to me also, I would like our young people to learn about Black experiences in Canada beyond slavery, and really talk about the contributions that Black people have made in our communities. That even myself, I think, as a Black person, need to be better versed on, or wish that I had learned more in mainstream public school. I attended a forum that I helped host through MedTrack on anti-Black racism in the city of Toronto, and was asking members of the Black community, what could we be doing better? And I heard from a mom just saying, the impact of Black history being taught, just about the Underground Railroad, just about Harriet Tubman, just about slavery, and the impact of her son only seeing himself ever depicted within their history books or within their lesson plan as a slave, and how that's something that he carries with him and thinks about when he's not seeing more empowering examples of himself, which there are.
Yeah, I also noticed that, especially in our mainstream media these days, there seems to be a real backlash to even the discussion, particularly where Black Lives Matter comes into play. What's your read on that? I mean, there have been some particularly egregious, columns in one of our major dailies, will go unnamed, talking about recent decisions like the decision by Pride, for example, and how non-inclusive this is. And of course, everybody's heard the all lives matter retort and the racism that represents. It's like saying, well, the trees in my neighborhood are all burning, and somebody retorting and say, yeah, but there are other trees, and like, what? So, I mean, what is your take on that? Like, where's this backlash? I mean, we know where it's coming from, but what's it all about?
I think that when, as a society, we're asked to look at the ways in which the most marginalized are treated, and that requires you, as somebody who maybe doesn't belong to that group, to think about how you're benefiting from the system and think about your own privilege and maybe your own contribution subconsciously to the problem. That can be a difficult task for some people. It can be an uncomfortable task and an uncomfortable conversation. And I think that the response to, we can't have a conversation about racism and race in this society without talking about white supremacy. And I think that people confuse that with talking about white people, and the conversation is not about white people individually. We have lots of allies and people who are doing some great work within their own communities, educating themselves. But we're talking about white supremacy, which is a system that says that whiteness is greater than any other color and should maintain and hold on to power. And so whenever we're talking about the redistribution of power, redistribution of wealth, and people giving up some things in order to create an equal society, that makes some folks uncomfortable. And I think that that's where the backlash is coming from, because we're being forced to have an honest conversation about Toronto the good. We like to think that because we're such a diverse, multicultural city, that's enough. But the statistics show differently. And, when we have communities being surveilled disproportionately, when we have Black folks in jails disproportionately, when we have poverty existing in Black communities of majority Black people impacting disproportionately, we need to have a conversation about that. When we're having Black folks minding their own business, walking the streets and being carted by police for no good reason, and then being documented and entered into systems, we need to start challenging and talking about what actually is happening here, and are we as good as we think we are, and if not, what are some of the roots of those problems? And I think that sometimes that looking inward becomes an uncomfortable process for people, and so we see the backlash that we see.
It's really quite shocking, and obviously, we who are white in this city and in this province have been raised in a racist society. There's no question about that. And there's no question that it permeated our educational systems and everything else in hiring, you name it, it's there. And it's still there. It's really quite surprisingly intractable right now. I mean, you've mentioned some of the ways, carding, which was another issue again. Profiling and carding, I've been at multiple demonstrations all my life, and never been carded. And yet, my friend Desmond Cole's been carded dozens of times. I mean, really, this should be enough. But there's, you have another identity as well in terms of your multiple identities, and that's to be Muslim. And of course, we have seen with the Muslim ban south of the border, and the court system that fought back and is still fighting back. But this is where it's headed one way or the other through Trump. Do you have relatives down there? I mean, are you affected by this directly?
I'm not. I do have relatives in the United States, but they're not Muslim. They're Christian. I come from a mixed family. Right. So they're Black, and they live now in Arizona. but they're Black and Christian, also just appalled at what they're seeing, and through the election, really concerned about what this would mean for the United States, what this would mean for their communities. My aunt immigrated to the United States in the late 80s and moved to Kentucky, and dealt with a lot of racism then from her neighbors and on a more individual level. But to see it happening so blatantly institutionally, I think for all of us, we know that racism has an ugly face that exists in our institutions. But to see the president of a country say what he says about Muslims and about people of color, about Mexicans, really, I think shook people to the core and continues to do that. I would like to say, though, it is a problem that we're seeing in the United States. But I think I watched the parts of the meeting between Trump and Trudeau today, and it makes me really uncomfortable at how comfortable he looked in that meeting. And also, today down the pipes we're seeing a new bill potentially being passed in Canada, Bill C-23, which will give U.S. border agents in our airports the ability to search in a way that they weren't able to before Canadian permanent residents, and allow them different powers at the border, which I think is just an extension of kind of that Trump ban and that targeting of Muslim communities.
Oh, absolutely. And not only absolutely, and we have a cap on refugees now of 1,000,
Exactly.
and uphold the third country policy, which of course means that if you're not accepted in the United States, you're not accepted here either.
Yes.
So I mean, essentially, we're as bad as Trump in that regard, and also, of course, condone torture, which another of our bills. So I mean, this is Trumpism with a prettier face and better hair,
right.
really. And it's absolutely shocking. Let's talk about your Muslim identity for a minute, though, too, because one of the things that I find particularly unnerving, and of course this has just been amplified since Trump was elected, but not that it wasn't there before, and that's Islamophobia that is definitely, just whenever, for example, we'll do a show mentioning, the word, or if anything is posted on social media, I can bet that the backlash will be phenomenal, and it will be mainly and mostly Islamophobic. That seems to be the thing that all the trolls can agree on. And it's really quite shocking. So for a while there, especially when the ban was announced, we were on my social media banning people, at a phenomenal rate, deleting and banning. And when you looked at them, it was interesting. My producer here, Lisa, pointed out that guess all but 3 were all white men. So we know where it's coming from. It doesn't seem to me either to be the kind of, the standard kind of troll in their mom's basement. This seems to be much more kind of coordinated and systemic, if I can use that word. Are you finding a shift?
I wouldn't say a shift. This all feels very familiar. Islamophobia, like you said, has existed for a very, very long time. The tragedy that took place in Quebec 2 Sundays ago, I think, really just elevated the conversation, and unfortunately had to take such violence and, the death of 6 fathers to have people wake up and to things that we as the Muslim community have been talking about for a very long time. I think, if you live in Toronto, you live in a bit of a bubble. We have a large Muslim community here. It's a very diverse community. You see Muslim women participating in all aspects of society. But, I think all of us have had one interaction or another, whether it's been at a border or at a grocery store or, just kind of the microaggressions that exist on a regular basis. I think that the political moment that we're in and the political leaders that we have the pleasure of engaging with, just have emboldened sections of our society that have already been there, and the way that even the Syrian refugee crisis is handled sets the stage for Islamophobia to rear its ugly head, and we saw it in the most violent way a couple of weeks ago, which I think sent a shock through all of us.
Absolutely, and certainly much prayer and light is warranted around the families and the children that are left behind there. And again, looking at that and the way this and the response has been characterized. You're Gilary, and by the way, if you just tuned in, we are speaking, of course, Black History and Black History Month, as we always do at this time of year. We're speaking today to two Black women activists. And right now on the phone is Gilary Massa. She's the equity officer for Cupe 1281, a new mum. And she's worked her whole life really creating spaces for communities to fight against injustice and oppression, and now for the rights of students and workers. One of the characterizations of the Trump supporter or of the Islamophobe or the racist period is a worker, and you must see this in the labor movement, or hear this stereotype of the blue collar worker who is scared to lose his job and takes the venom out on immigrants. As a labor person, how do you respond to that?
I think that you can't denounce or ignore the reality, the real anxiety that people feel in this country around unemployment, around poverty. I think that many of us, regardless of race, are experiencing the ways in which unemployment and the taking of jobs is impacting our communities and our families. And unfortunately, poverty is something that does hit, people of all color. It disproportionately affects people of color, disproportionately affects Black people. But I think it's a challenging one. It's often when we have these conversations, the powers that be like to pit the poor against the poor, as if we are the ones that created the problem for one another. I think it's really about talking to folks about compassion and why people are coming and seeking refuge in Canada in the first place. I think for a lot of refugees, they much rather be back home with their loved ones in the jobs that they know, in the communities that they understand, and speaking the language that they know. That's home for them, and they've had to flee because of war, because of poverty, because of environmental disasters, things that really they had no say in creating, and have sought refuge in our country. So I think really it's a call to our governments to be talking about unemployment in a real way, and also providing services for newcomers that in a way that doesn't pit the need of those who are seeking refugee status here in Canada against those who are dealing with things like unemployment and poverty here as well. I don't know that it needs to be one or the other. One
shocking thing, but it's I know generalized. If somebody will say it to me, they'll say it to anybody. That I heard recently because of the recent deportations that are happening in the States, of course, which are, by the way, happening. We should put that word out, that this is happening in a widespread basis. That we already seen people walking over the border into our country because they're desperate and frightened. But talking about deporting Mexicans in the States, many have been there for many years, back to Mexico, some of them who don't even remember it. And this person said to me, well, I came to this country as an immigrant and I had to do the process, and it took me 2.5 years, and why should some people get to jump the queue? This was the comment. And again, I'm sure you've heard all of this. But again, there's this, what strikes me is that behind a comment like that is fear, like fear for your own job, fear for your own family, fear for your own, standard of living, whatever that might be. And it's shocking in its lack of compassion, obviously, but I mean, it's also, of course, encouraged by the forces that be, and one sees that.
And also a lack of acknowledgement that, like, all of us had a hand up, whether you are a white Canadian or not. At some point in time, the government provided opportunities and provided, in some cases, land to people to be able to set themselves up, and on the backs of Indigenous folks. So there's a history here that I think that there's an ignorance about, and that goes back to even the conversation around Black History Month and the things that are taught to us in school that completely erases a particular history that does exist in this country, and just really makes us think about our individual needs over the needs of our global community. I think, and also just a lot of the work that we don't want to do as Canadians is done by refugees, is done by migrant workers, is done by undocumented folks. I recently read an article in the United States of crops going bad because people who have come as undocumented workers or as migrant workers have just left out of fear of what is to come, and so things are just rotting because the entire workforce is fleeing, and so I think we need to acknowledge the fact that our country wouldn't run if it wasn't for immigrants and migrant workers, and there needs to be a real acknowledgement of that reality.
And it's shocking, and here again, to get back to the Canadian context, it's shocking because our migrant workers have no rights, no health care,
Exactly.
and
And
often,
there's the perception that they're getting handouts, right?
I know it's and have no right. They could come here for years and still can't be part of the immigration system,
Exactly.
and it's really quite shocking. And of course, we shouldn't get through this program without mentioning, of course, our record on Indigenous rights, which is which is horrendous, and even under the current government that said they were going to do it differently, of course, are not upholding the United Nations resolution on Indigenous peoples. So again, we're back to where we were before. One of the things I often say, because we're talking about how our kids are taught, and this is not often taught, and most people don't know it, but that apartheid was invented here. We as Canadians invented apartheid. The South Africans actually copied it from our systems here, and that's needs to be said over and over again, because that says a lot, I think, about our history in this country. Yeah. So your work in the labor movement now, where do you go from here? What are the issues that you're dealing with strictly in the labor movement that are first and foremost for you?
I mean, I work in the labor movement insofar as that I'm doing work with my local as the equity officer, and so a lot of my work is around how to talk about equity issues and anti-oppression within the labor movement. My other hat is I'm the advocacy coordinator for the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and so we've been doing some work with the labor movement to talk about Islamophobia and talk about the issues of Muslim workers in workplaces, and really the rights of work at work for Muslim workers, and by extension all workers, and the ways in which unions can be supporting their members to ensure that these rights are being upheld. So, right to time off for religious holidays, right to religious attire, right to be able to take off to do prayer, and so really educating the labor movement on how to better support Muslim workers is kind of my focus right now.
And how should we better support Muslim workers? What sorts of things are being recommended? I mean, you mentioned some of them, obviously time off for religious holidays, being allowed to wear religious gear, etc. Are there other things you're noticing in the workforce that have come to bear?
We recently held a forum for Muslim workers to talk about some of the instances of Islamophobia in the workplace, and we heard from something that just sticks to me is this idea for especially for those working in frontline work, social workers, CIS workers, that kind of heavy mental health work, where they're providing support for people who are dealing with things. A lot of them struggle with taking care of their own mental health, or even taking mental health breaks, especially because we're seeing a lot of things happening within the Muslim community that really has an impact on the psyche. I can't imagine having to take care of, as a PSW or as a CIS Children's Aid Society worker, or as a social worker in the time that we heard about the Quebec attack. And how do you support your Muslim workers who are dealing with kind of the geopolitical things that have a deep impact on the personal, while they're trying to support communities through their work. And so that's kind of some of the stuff that we've been talking about, and how to help unions communicate to management about, making sure that their Muslim workers know that the workplace is a safe one for them, that they can take time off as mental health breaks. And if those things don't exist, to think about how to include them within collective agreements and things like that.
I hear at least the producer is showing me a sign. I hear you have an event coming up that you also wanted to speak about, and you should.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm working with an organization called METRAC. They're a violence against women prevention program. I wear a lot of hats, as you see. And OCASI, which is the Ontario Coalition for South Asians, is doing this Toronto for All. And I don't know how many of you have seen, commercials or ads on TV about anti-Black racism and about Islamophobia. So one of the projects that they've taken on is to have these roundtables for the Black community internally to talk about anti-Black racism and provide recommendations to the city around their action plan to combat anti-Black racism. And so there's 11 agencies that were provided funding to be able to do these forums, and METRAC was one of them. We have 2 left that we're doing, one on the 15th and one on the 16th. So on the 15th is a women's only space, also for deaf and hard of hearing community, and it's taking place at Ryerson at 6 p.m. And it's open to anybody who identifies as Black and as a woman. So hopefully people can come out to that and provide their recommendations.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. When you talked about violence against women, one of the best articles I saw this week came out of the New York Times, and I posted it on my Facebook, which said that basically our tact, or their tact in the States, is wrong. That really we should be looking at husbands. That husbands are far more dangerous than terrorists in terms of deaths. And it's shocking, but absolutely true. It's a very interesting article. So husbands more dangerous than terrorists. If you're a woman. Well, thank you. Thanks so much. I've been talking to Gilary Massa. We've been talking about her experience as an equity officer, as an activist, as an anti-racist and anti-oppression activist, Afro Latina Muslim woman. Thanks, Gilary. Thanks for being on Three Women. We're going to take a bit of a musical break. We're going to come back, and we have our second guest, Septembre Anderson. And she, again, a feminist activist. She's been doing just a little bit about everything, including fashion. We're going to talk to her, Septembre, after this break.
The sound of your city. Right here, right now, every day. CIUT 89.5, Toronto.
And welcome back. You are listening to Three Women here, and you can phone us up if you want at 416-946-7000. Love to hear your voice. Or you can reach us at Twitter at Sherry DeNovo. I'm your host, CHERIDINOVO. Of course, you tweet us, we'll tweet you too. And that, by the way, was Shakira Saida. The tune was Time. And we're all about Black history this hour on Three Women. And we were just talking to Gilary Massa, and we have another amazing young activist, and that's Septembre Anderson. Septembre, welcome to Three Women.
Hello. Hi, Sherry. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you describe yourself as a freelance writer, public thinker, and reluctant feminist and activist. You don't seem so reluctant to me.
I guess it's a reluctance more around the title and not about doing the work and using my voice.
Well, I know you as a journalist. I mean, you've been covering a number of things, and I think one of the interesting things is you cover not only issues of political action and race, but you cover fashion, beauty, lifestyle. It's exciting.
Yes, I do. It gets to be originally I'm a fashion beauty lifestyle writer, and I guess it was wanting to see change happen in the world in Toronto that led me to covering politics and current events and a lot of Toronto-centric stuff, as well as going more broader and global.
So it's Black History. What are your thoughts? Like, what do you think? I mean, there's been many years now of Black History. Where are we at? What's like if you were to take a temperature on issues of race? What would you be saying?
I think it's becoming more evident why we need to do the work. For so long in Canada, we've kind of been coasting off of our identity as a multicultural society and all of these other things. But now we're seeing why Black History Month is so important. Now we're seeing why learning this history and understanding racism and all of these systems of oppression are so important, because we're seeing what happens when that hate is given space to flourish.
Which it clearly has south of the border, but we're, our hands are not clean by any stretch up here. Gilary was mentioning the meeting that Trudeau's having with Trump as we speak, and one of the problems there, of course, is that we still uphold the third country rule, which, if people aren't familiar with it, means we don't accept you in the States, we don't accept you here. And also we've got a cap on refugees of 1,000, and we're bringing in this new bill which will allow American border officials on our soil to basically card our people, and of course we've got carding and many other things happening as well. So yeah, I mean there is this kind of image of ourselves as a kinder, gentler nation, which in some ways we are, like below that. But I mean we got a long way to go. It's a problem.
There's definitely a lot of work left for us to do. And I don't want us to get so caught up into this idea of Canada as the utopian promised land and forget that we still have so much more work to do. And that also, that tipping point, which we saw in the United States and which we unfortunately saw in Quebec, yes, that is still very much a possibility. We also need to not get caught up in the rhetoric and the tweets of Justin Trudeau and look at what he's actually doing, because, you know what I mean, it's so easy to follow the tweets and they're so digestible, but we need to look at the policy and the things that he's doing.
Yeah, I mean it's a problem, and it for us, I always think we have way better PR than Donald Trump. Mind you, there is that it is pretty terrifying, of course, being that close to this behemoth that seems to be raging out of control these days with a Muslim ban, etc. Now, bringing it home, what are you focusing on now in your work? What's is there a focus to what you're writing these days?
My writing these days, it's always, you know what I mean, race and feminism always seems to be at the center of it. It seems to be what people most need people talking about, so that is the focus of my work, kind of starting to segue also into racialized women in technology. And of course, closer to home, looking at Parkdale and what's going on in that neighborhood and that kind of ongoing marginalization there.
Yeah, we just again kind of local news now from the general to the local. There was a potential rent strike in our neighborhood, which is interesting, and again points to the need for a number of things like affordable housing and real rent control. But what's great is to see tenants really saying no. It's not okay to raise our rent above the guidelines. Just because you put in new balconies. I mean, these are balconies that had to go in anyway.
Exactly.
This should not be. Should not be. The other weird thing about that, the way it's structured, of course, and they're going to the tribunal, which is heavily slants towards landlords, and of course, landlords have lawyers. Sometimes community folk. I mean, we have. Thank you, Parkdale Legal, for stepping up. But I mean, they're always.
There's only so much that Parkdale Legal can do, especially when you're dealing with lawyers on the one hand who have so much experience and so much close relationships with people at the tribunal, as opposed to Parkdale Legal where you're being represented by law students.
Yeah.
So there's still very much that disparity, and it's very hard to advocate for yourself and to really stand up when you're looking at losing your home. You know what I mean? You may be taking a deal that is to the best of your benefit and not getting justice just so that you're not thrown out onto the street into a rental market where housing is so expensive. But I'm really, really happy to see Parkdale tenants effectively organizing and being able to stand up. It's so needed to have that kind of community and have that show of numerical force.
Absolutely. And one should point out, too, in Black History Month, that this is a racialized problem, poverty and high rents and, in neighborhoods. I mean, if you look at the people that are standing on the street with signs for the rent strike. These are primarily, new immigrants of color. I mean, that's who lives, and in fact, in Parkdale, South Parkdale used to be one of the last places in Toronto that new immigrants could come and actually afford to live. But I mean, that's rapidly shifting as we see. And again, we've got three levels of government that have been out of the building housing affordable market for decades. So that's not helping either.
To see that loss, like you said, it's one of the few places within the city of Toronto where immigrants could live, where racialized people could have affordable housing. And if these people, you know what I mean, my neighbors have built up this neighborhood and made it such a, a gem for all of these gentrifiers to want a piece of. And we're seeing so many people being pulled out of the city, pushed out of the city proper. And right now, Parkdale is kind of a food desert with the loss of no frills, but a lot of people are being pushed into food deserts with low infrastructure. And as you know, Parkdale has so many services for immigrants and so much of an ability to find community and a sense of belonging in a new country. It's just so sad to see all of that losing. On the positive side, I heard that there is going to be, in the distant future, community housing being built in Parkdale on Brock Street where the old LCBO used to be. So that's kind of hopeful. I'm hoping Parkdale, you know what I mean? Some of the original Parkdalians will still be living here by the time that happens.
Yeah, I mean, never enough, of course, never enough. So now this Black History Month, clearly, when we think of it, and I think of shifts in terms of the anti-racism movement, you can't but mention Black Lives Matter. I mean, it's everywhere, it's there, and they've done some great work. And what's shocking to, this lowly commentator is the reaction of the mainstream media, which is horrendous.
Being on this inside, it's not surprising to me at all, having to navigate within that field. And with the absence of voices of color, that there's nothing, you know what I mean? Even when people talk about the power and privilege I have as a writer, I only have, you know what I mean? I submit the articles or the pitch, and they get accepted or they don't. So it's so hard to add voices to that and kind of re-educate the public around white supremacy, around systemic anti-Blackness, to get a hold of those conversations. It's really just so difficult.
I mean, I don't know what city they grew up in, but I can tell you the city I grew up in.
Yeah.
racist. I mean, you just look at our. I heard a stat today that 90% of the books still in our elementary schools don't have one person of color in them.
Yeah.
These are the kids. These are stories
Yep.
our kids are reading. Not to mention the toys they're playing with, the images they see on TV. I mean, clearly, this should be beyond discussion at this point. But I mean, it's just really, and it's kind of shocking that. That and the whole situation with Pride that kind of erupted the way it did. But I mean, just the misreporting. I mean, it was never said by Pride that police could not take part just as an official organ, like individual police, absolutely.
But we see that it's what I mean. Even with the police discourse around it, it comes to the point of alternative facts, right? Pride never said that. However, they're choosing to tell the story that they've seen all the LGBTQ police officers are no longer allowed to participate in an aspect of their identity. And nobody said that, just not as an official force. You can come and party all you want.
Absolutely.
Just leave your uniform at home.
Just leave your guns at home, Michael.
Exactly.
I mean, we would ask this of anybody coming to a party, right? Really?
Exactly.
I mean, I sort of expect that people that come to my house leave their guns at home. I mean,
yeah,
really.
Exactly.
So,
especially
I mean,
with the discourse, sorry to interrupt, but especially when we're having this discussion around carding, we're having these discussions and have been having these discussions for time immemorial in this country around the relationship between police and the Black community. So I don't know why it's such a surprise to so many people. Even when we're seeing this Black Lives Matter movement that springs up in the United States and comes into Canada, and you're seeing ripples all over the world, it's just so funny that this is such a sticking point for some people. We've been having this conversation, and then we see Trump in the White House due to an inability to address these issues head on, and yet we're still battling this. You know what I mean? It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, it truly is. So anyway, hopefully more fact-checking happens.
Yeah,
at least more.
Really,
yeah, go ahead.
It's really that simple. You know what I mean? We as journalists need to ask the questions. We need to question our elected officials. We need to do the thing. We need to remember who we serve. And journalists, our responsibility is to the public. That is our responsibility. We're not supposed to be pleasing politicians. We don't work for them. We need to ask the questions because we get to be in the rooms with the politicians where the people can't be. So we have to fact check, and we have to educate the public, and we have to challenge elected officials, and we need to get serious about this. Otherwise, we're just, you know what I mean? We're working for Trump if we're not. We have to make a decision.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Three Women. We're talking to Septembre Anderson, freelance writer, public thinker and feminist and activist. Her journalism covers a whole range of topics. And we're delighted to have her on the show in this Black History Month, 2017.
Yeah.
And just, without sort of segueing too far away from Black Lives Matter and the alternative facts stuff, it really is. We're sort of looking at the future now and seeing the Trump phenomenon. Let's say even in Canada, and we of course couldn't get through the show without mentioning the massacre that happened in Quebec. Yes. But just the fact of Trump has really opened the Pandora's box of a lot. You knew it was there all along, but now people are getting to say it out loud. Sadly, emboldened to be racist, to be Islamophobic, to be. I mean, this is what I'm noticing on social media, and I'm sure you're seeing it places too. And it's interesting that the mainstream press, while we're at it, I was just speaking to somebody else here in the station saying it. Sometimes I get the impression of the mainstream press that it's sort of like the battered woman who, won't turn her husband in and keeps running after him for more abuse. Because here mainstream media is giving Trump so much airtime, as they did, which helped him get elected. And I know because he's kind of the dancing bear, the same reason we gave Rob Ford lots of airtime. But at the end of the day, what you don't realize is that there's no bad press. So he's getting this airtime. It's just fueling him and those who think like him. I just wish they'd pay as much attention to the resistance to Trump as they do to Trump. One thing to cover him, got it, but cover the resistance as well with equal time.
But what I find so interesting in Toronto is we should have learned our lesson after doing 4 years of Ford. We didn't learn our lesson. We should have. We remember this Trump thing. We dealt with it first, and now it's happening. It happened again. We allowed it to happen again and didn't learn from that history. We need to focus on covering the news, not covering the circus. we're not covering the news. And I hoped we would learn, but we didn't learn, and now here we are again, and we're reproducing it from the brother next door as we're watching it unfold in the United States. There's so many, like even they were talking about Mar-a-Lago and the guy who holds the box so that Trump can access the nuclear quotes no matter where he is. He's taking pictures with people at a private club, and they're posting it on Facebook, and so much access. Like, this is serious. It's not, you know what I mean? As much as it is funny, it's also absolutely terrifying. Yep. I know, not to be alarmist, but the fate of the world is in this man's hands, and we're laughing.
I know, and again, better that Saturday Night Live is focusing on laughing at him, but there's also some serious journalism work that's got to happen. I know what the most egregious instance of that, I think, was the phenomenal march here. Kudos out there for those, and we've had them on the show who organized it, of the Women's March that happened here. It wasn't just women, it was everybody. But I mean, there are tens of thousands, biggest demonstration in the history of the world, 600 of them around the world. And I go home, turn on a channel, which I will mention again, but we can guess what it was. And it's just his face. It's Trump's face speaking to the CIA for 20 minutes while this demonstration is still ongoing. There's a byline, about it, and there's occasional clip, but it's mainly him. And I thought, this is wild. So again, equal time for the resistance out there, please.
Yes, please. And also and it's not even social issue if this is news. It's not even... You know what I mean? Though there's a response to truth and to be on the right side of history, but this is news. We're seeing so many, the organization, even when we looked at the Muslim ban and we saw lawyers sitting down at airports all over the United States, hunkering down and getting the work done to challenge him. So many people are doing the work to challenge him. And we need to focus on the resistance and help build the resistance. So I'm hoping, you know what I mean? I am hopeful that this is enough of a fire under us for us to wake up and get busy. And so many people already are.
Yeah. So bringing it back home again here, again, sort of moving forward now. So looking at the next generation, like what should we be doing differently so that, I mean, this intractable problem of racism that we have in this country. And again, one of the things that, you sort of hear the backlash retort is, well, we've made so much progress. Well, that kind of, and so it's going to take another century. Like what?
Yeah. I was on I did a Facebook Live with a news organization, and one of the women has done research into online hate. And she said, racist online hate has increased in Canada by 600%. So this violence over a 1-year period, she's noticed this stark increase. There's so much work that we can do. And even when you talked about the library books and how they're predominantly feature white characters, at my son's school, the parents there are doing a book audit, and they're going through the books in the library and in the classrooms to see what diversity is there and to replace those books with more diverse books. That's a large thing to do, but there's so many little things that people can do to help out and to take part in the resistance. It doesn't all have to be a large organization. And I think political education is so important to understand what is racism. A lot of people don't know the difference between prejudice, stereotype, and racism. Or when you say systemic racism, and when we talk about the interpersonal, and you know what I mean? There's a lot of education that people can do. Just simple reading. We're in the information age. There's so much out there. But I think education is key. And then finding your community, even if it's just you and a friend, and doing what you can do to make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, again, the resistance begins wherever you are and wherever you go. Absolutely. That's a shocking statistic. I'm still kind of reeling from that. 600% increase.
In one of the most diverse cities in the world. Mm-hmm.
Which explains all these trolls on social media that suddenly just picked up steam. And it's not just, and we should say, this is, of course, not just North America. This is worldwide. We're looking at the far right in France making a resurgence, etc.
Exactly. And Brexit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even in France, there's ongoing protests that's been going on for days that's not getting enough media attention for the black man who was sexually abused and physically abused by the police there. And people have stood up, and, it's kind of a situation where Paris is burning, where people are saying, no, we won't take it anymore. So we're noticing all over the world or throughout the West that people are standing up and saying no more. We need to not feel so isolated. We're part of a large movement. And it'd be great to see people on the right side of history this time.
My first guest, Gilary, is a member of the labor movement, and it was fun talking to her about sort of challenging the stereotype of the redneck working class,
Yes.
which is a stereotype, and has been disproved, by the way, in terms of those who supported Trump, even because they're
lots
not
of university educated people.
and they made more
High
money,
earners.
they're
Exactly.
high earner. But I mean, but again, that kind of exists out there, this, and it truly is, the system that, pits worker against worker, of course, because it's easier to get them to blame your neighbor than it is to get them to blame the system.
Exactly. And and we need to be mindful of that we're in this together. I think it's important to remember, and important to learn that we are in this together, marginalized communities, and that we need to start working as a unified, because Trump is coming for us all. Even if he was just coming for Black people, that's still enough of a reason to unite against something like that.
Oh yeah, well, I have a number of friends in the States who are all of them thinking of ways they can get back here. But one of them, my Jewish friend from New York, said, I'm going to get out. I mean, I can pass, but I'm still getting out before he figures out I'm Jewish. I mean, this is a general fear that's happening in the populace. But again, they're coming to a country that's not all that safe either. So we have to do some work on that. You're from Parkdale. You're a Parkdalian, proud Parkdalian, as am I. One of the most shocking things to me there was when the Roma were deported from our neighborhood. I mean, we lost 200 students from a public school, and nobody knew where they went. It just happened overnight. It was in the silence of darkness. It was reminiscent of the 30s in Germany. It was horrendous. And nobody could find out any information. It was just all covert.
Teachers couldn't find students. Some teachers got a late night phone call and never heard from, you know what I mean? Didn't get the call, got a message. And that's what we need to realize when we think that, we're so much better. Those are not problems that exist here. The Roma community in Parkdale is a marginalized community, and there's so much deportation. So many people have gone underground because they fear the deportation. It's really something that we need to focus on. And we're seeing a lot of Roma being displaced to other neighborhoods where they don't have the support and are not able to build those community supports even amongst themselves.
No, it truly was shocking. And it was shocking that it, again, happened, with before anybody could kind of react or do anything about it. In a kind of weird way, what we do as Canadians is we deport people quietly. We keep them in rooms that don't have a sign over them, right? The States are, just kick the door and take them and then put them to a place, say illegal aliens in neon letters. I mean, we're just more covert about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're more covert. But that is a little known part of our neighborhood and our Toronto history that was really shocking, and the most blatant example of racism I've seen for a long time, really. And sadly, there was a lot of racism that met them when they came, in terms of the neighborhood, and that was also disconcerting.
I remember seeing graffiti, anti-Roma graffiti throughout Parkdale as well.
Yeah, and all the social service agencies, which are great in our neighborhood, try to meet it with, sort of counter narratives, but I mean, it was there. There's no question it was there.
Yeah.
So it shows you how quickly that can escalate and turn into something really quite ugly.
Exactly.
So what's ahead? I'm talking to Septembre Anderson, of course, freelance writer, journalist, done a little bit of everything over the years. And we're talking, of course, about Black History because it is that month. And boy, we have a lot of things to be active about going forward, certainly in this world. If nothing else, one can say the issues are very delineated. It's very clear now what's going on, and must be very clear to be, what side you're on. I think the old "Whose Side Are You On" song, but it is very true going forward. So what's on the horizon for you, Septembre? What are you into next? And it could be something. It doesn't have to be weighty and political, because we know that you also have this whole other side to you. So.
Yes. Well, I'm doing lots of things next that are totally, trying to do things for myself. I'm doing web development, and I'm going on a trip to Morocco. I'm leaving on Wednesday. But my mind and heart are always on Parkdale, always on the Black community.
So what takes you to Morocco?
Whim. Bought a ticket 7 months ago, and just the whim.
That's wonderful. So now, of course, when you come back and you've got that stamp on your passport, you know what you might be looking at when you go to the airport trying to go to the States.
Well, I'm worried about crossing international borders, and it's interesting. I'm a Canadian-born citizen, so I always think about the people who don't have the privilege of being, you know what I mean, not only a Canadian passport, but a Canadian birth certificate. And I think we need to remember that even in our privilege, you know what I mean, I'm a Black woman traveling across international borders to North Africa. I won't be going to New York anytime soon.
No, I was going to say, because wasn't there an incident just recently of Canadian-born folk with Morocco stamped on the passports who were turned away, and especially with this bill C-23, this comes through, then even more so. I guess at least the good news is you'll find out on this side of the border.
Exactly. But with the new law coming into place, we'll find out at this side of the border after being interrogated and have my privacy violated. That's what's also we need to be aware of, as you said, that these policies, these American stuff are leaking in many ways, not in just the hate of the general population, but also through government policy. So we need to be vigilant and active and resist.
Yeah. Have you personally noticed any uptake in racism?
It's hard to notice. I remember my grandmother said during the Great Depression, she was in Trinidad, she's like, we were poor before and we were poor after. So the violence I dealt with, it's ongoing and it's persistent, so I haven't noticed an uptick. It's just still going on.
More of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so going forward, listen, so have a wonderful time in your trip in Morocco. How long are you gone for?
13 days.
Oh, it'll be fun. Where are you going?
Yes. I'm going to Marrakesh, and then I'm doing a little bit of Fez and Chefchaouen.
Ah, lovely.
Blue City. Yeah.
You'll have a great. We've been talking to Septembre Anderson, and out there, of course, your host Sherry DeNovo. This has been all about three women, and our three women today, of course, myself always, and Gilary Massa, wonderful Latina Muslim Black woman, and Septembre Anderson, our journalist and feminist activist, and now a world traveler, all about Black history. So it's been a pleasure talking to you. By the way, we love on Three Women to get your insights and your feedback. Do send them to me on Facebook at Sherry, CHERI, DeNovo, DINOVO, or tweet me at the same. I want to send a big thank you out there to Lisa, our producer, and Aaron, our tech. Fantastic work again, and we will see you next time on Three Women. Keep the responses coming, and of course, celebrate Black History Month. Bye.
Into the